The thing about humans is that they break far too easily. I should know. I have been observing them for 17 cycles now. Ever since the Galactic Council deemed their species worthy of, let's call it supervised contact. My designation is Vortelv, though the humans I work with insist on calling me Vornan, which apparently sounds friendlier to their primitive auditory sensors. I work at the Interspecies Medical Research Facility on what they call Station Kepler 9, and my job, if you can call it that, involves documenting the frankly absurd ways human biology decides to malfunction. Today was supposed to be routine. Spoiler alert. It was not. The human in question was named Dr. Lena Kovacs, a xenobiologist who specialized in comparative anatomy. 32 years old by human reckoning, which meant she was barely past adolescence in any sensible species lifespan. She had dark hair that she kept tied back in what humans call a ponytail, a term that makes no sense whatsoever since it involves no actual tails or ponies. Her eyes were brown, sharp, and had this irritating habit of noticing things before I did. "Vernon," she would say, peering at my notes with those two clever eyes, "you have mixed up the ventral and dorsal notations again." Infuriating. On the morning of the incident, Lena arrived at the lab at 0600 hours, which was apparently early even by human standards. I found her hunched over a microscope, analyzing tissue samples from a Corellian sand swimmer. The samples were stable, contained, and completely harmless. Or so we thought. "Good morning, Vernon," she called out without looking up. How did humans always know when someone entered a room? They lacked proper sensory antennae, yet somehow they just knew. "I think I have found something interesting in these cell structures. The protein folding is completely unlike anything we have seen before." I approached her workstation, my three-fingered hands clasped behind my back. "Interesting is a dangerous word in xenobiology, Dr. Kovacs." She laughed. "Humans do that a lot. This sharp exhalation of air that indicates amusement. You worry too much. What is the worst that could happen?" Ah, famous last words. The next few hours passed without incident. We documented the samples, ran spectral analysis, and argued about proper classification systems. Lena insisted on using human-centric terminology, which I found needlessly complicated. Why say mitochondria when energy organelle conveys the same information with fewer syllables? At approximately 11:30 hours, Lena decided to run one more test. "I want to see how the proteins react to electrical stimulation," she announced, already programming the equipment. "The Corellians generate bioelectric fields naturally. Maybe these cells retain some of that capacity." "That seems unwise," I commented, which was my way of saying, "Please do not do that thing you are about to do." "Noted," she replied, which was her way of saying, "I am definitely doing this thing anyway." She activated the electrical probe. For exactly 2.3 seconds, nothing happened. The tissue sample sat there, inert and boring, like tissue samples are supposed to behave. Then it pulsed, not a little twitch. A full rhythmic contraction, like a heartbeat. Except the sample was not a heart. It was not even cardiac tissue. It was a fragment of dermal layer. For the love of the founders. "That is not possible," I said, leaning closer. "And yet," Lena murmured, her eyes wide with fascination rather than the appropriate amount of terror. "There it goes." The pulse grew stronger, faster. The containment field around the sample began to fluctuate, and I saw the energy reading spike on the monitor. Something was very wrong. "Luna, step back from the containment field failed." What happened next occurred in the space of perhaps 3 seconds, but I can recall every detail with perfect clarity. The Corellian tissue sample exploded, not with heat or concussive force, but with a burst of bioelectric energy that arced across the lab like lightning. Lena was the closest target. The electricity hit her square in the chest. Her body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed to the floor in a heap of limbs that bent at angles that made my digestive system clench in sympathetic horror. I activated the emergency medical protocol before her body finished falling. Alarms blared. The lab sealed itself automatically. Medical drones descended from the ceiling compartments, their scanners already active. I reached her in 4 strides, my hands shaking in a way that hands should not shake when one is a trained medical observer. "Luna, Dr. Kovacs, respond." Nothing. The medical drone completed its scan and displayed the results in holographic text above her body. I read the words twice because they made no sense. Cardiac arrest. No pulse. No respiration. Brain activity, minimal and declining rapidly. She was dead, well, clinically dead. There is a difference, though it is a small one, when you are the person lying on the floor not breathing. Initiate resuscitation protocols. I ordered the drones. My voice came out steadier than I felt, which was something. The drones went to work immediately. One positioned itself over her chest and began compressions. The mechanical precision far more reliable than any organic being could manage. Another established an airway. A third deployed the cardiac stimulator, placing the pads on her chest with calibrated gentleness. Charging, the drone announced in its flat, emotionless voice. Clear. Lena's body jerked as the electricity coursed through her. The monitor showed no change. Still flatline. Again I said, charging. Clear. Another jolt. Another flatline. I checked my chronometer. 1 minute and 15 seconds since cardiac arrest. Brain damage begins at 4 minutes in humans. We had time. Not much, but some. Increase voltage by 15%, I ordered. That exceeds safe parameters for human physiology. The drone replied, I am aware. Do it anyway. Charging. Clear. This time, when the electricity hit, something changed. Not on the monitors. Those still showed nothing. But I saw it with my own eyes. For just a fraction of a second, Lena's skin seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from desert sand, like light refracting through water. Did you detect that? I asked the drone. Detect what? Researcher Vorthalv. Never mind, again. Same voltage. We continued. 2 minutes. 2.5. 3 minutes. The medical drone's voice took on what might have been urgency if machines could feel such things. Brain activity declining to critical levels. Recommends cessation of resuscitation attempts. Negative. Continue. Researcher Vorthalv. Probability of successful revival with intact neurological function is now below 3%. I said continue. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Her lips were turning blue. Her skin had taken on a waxy pallor that I recognized from too many autopsies. And then something happened that I still cannot fully explain. Lena's eyes opened. Not slowly. Not with the gradual return to consciousness that one might expect. They snapped open both at once. And they were wrong. The irises, normally a warm brown, had taken on a strange luminescence. Not glowing, exactly, but lit from within like bioluminescent organisms in the deep oceans of Thalassi's 3. Her hand shot out faster than my eyes could track and grabbed the medical drone's appendage mid-compression. Her grip was so strong that the reinforced metal actually creaked. Stop, she said. But it was not her voice. Not entirely. There was an echo to it, a harmonic resonance that made my ear canals ache. The medical drone, unable to comprehend being manhandled by its patient, tried to pull away. Lena's other hand came up and grasped the drone's central processing unit. With a casual twist that should not have been possible for human musculature, she pulled it free. The drone went limp, sparks cascading from the hole where its brain had been. Okay, I said slowly, holding up my hands in what I hoped was a non-threatening gesture. Okay, Lena, you are alive. That is good. Very good. Now if you could please let go of the expensive medical equipment. Her head turned toward me. The movement was too smooth, too controlled. Humans have jerky, imprecise motor control compared to most species. This was different. Vorn 12, she said in that wrong harmonic voice. Interesting. The language centers are still intact. Memory engrams. Yes, I can access them. Dr. Lena Kovacs. Xenobiologist. Born in Budapest, Hungary, Earth, raised by a single mother after father died in the Tycho incident. Has a cat named Schrödinger. Allergic to shellfish. Thinks you are, and I quote, uptight but secretly sweet. I felt my skin flush purple with embarrassment, which is the Novarian equivalent of blushing. Who are you? She stood up. The other medical drones had backed away, their threat assessment protocols clearly struggling with this scenario. Lena looked down at her hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. Who am I? She repeated the question like she was tasting it. I was dormant for so long. Then the electricity, the same pattern, the same frequency. It woke me. That explains nothing, I said, though my scientific curiosity was rapidly overtaking my very reasonable fear. Are you a parasite, a symbiote? Some kind of Corellian contamination. Corellian. She laughed, and this time it was definitely Lena's laugh, which somehow made it worse. No, much older than them. Much older than any of you. I have been sleeping in the spaces between cells, in the quantum foam of biological matter, waiting. And now I am awake." She took a step toward me. I held my ground, mostly because my legs had forgotten how to move. "You should be afraid," she said softly. "Most beings would be." "I am terrified," I assured her, "but I am also a scientist. So before you do whatever horrible thing you are planning to do, would you mind answering a few questions for my research notes?" She tilted her head, and for a moment I saw Lena in there, the real Lena, fighting to surface through whatever this other thing was. "You are strange, Orthanor 12, she said. "I like that. Very well. Ask your questions. But be quick. This body is not optimal. I will need to make adjustments." "Adjustments?" I echoed weakly. "What kind of adjustments?" She smiled. Her teeth seemed sharper than I remembered. "The kind that will let me survive what comes next." "And what comes next?" Her eyes, still glowing with that eerie inner light, fixed on mine. "War. Researcher. War on a scale this galaxy has not seen in 15 million years. The Corellians did not just die out, you see. They were weapons, soldiers in an ancient conflict, and one of them, it seems, left behind a seed, a genetic key, a trigger. A trigger for what? For me, for all of us. The old powers are stirring Vorthauvent humanity. Fragile, breakable, impossible humanity. Just became the most dangerous species in the galaxy." She turned and walked toward the lab's sealed door. With one hand, she punched through the reinforced steel like it was paper. The metal screamed as she tore the door from its frame and tossed it aside. "Where are you going?" I called after her. She paused at the threshold and looked back. For just a moment her eyes were brown again. "Normal. Human." Lena's eyes. "To wake the others," she said quietly. "And Vernon? You might want to start running." Then she was gone, moving down the corridor with inhuman speed. I stood there in the ruined lab, surrounded by broken equipment and the smell of ozone, and did what any sensible scientist would do in that situation. I began taking notes. After all, if humanity was about to become a galactic threat, someone needed to document it properly. The intercom crackled to life. Station security, demanding to know what had happened in Lab 7. In the background I could hear alarms. Shouts. The distinctive sound of weapons fire. I looked at my notes. 3 minutes dead. That was all it had taken. 3 minutes of clinical death, and Lena Kovacs had come back as something else entirely. Something powerful. Something ancient. Something that claimed there were more. "This," I said to the empty room, "is going to require so much paperwork." And then, because I am apparently constitutionally incapable of good survival instincts, I grabbed my datapad and headed toward the sounds of chaos. If humanity was about to change the galaxy, I was going to get it on record. Station Kepler 9 had approximately 12,000 inhabitants on any given day, representing 47 different species from across the Galactic Council. It was considered one of the most secure research facilities in this sector of space, with defensive systems designed to repel everything from pirate raids to asteroid impacts. None of that mattered when the threat came from inside. I followed the sound of weapons fire down Corridor 12B, my datapad clutched in one hand and what remained of my common sense rapidly abandoning me. The rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive through 342 years of mostly cautious existence, was screaming at me to run in the opposite direction. The scientist part, which apparently had a death wish, needed to see what happened next. The scientist part won. It usually does. The corridor ahead was a mess. Scorch marks decorated the walls where plasma weapons had missed their targets. 2 security drones lay in sparking heaps, their chassis torn open like someone had peeled them apart with bare hands, which, knowing what I now knew about Lena, was probably exactly what had happened. I heard voices ahead. One was definitely human. The other belonged to Commander Thex, the station's head of security, and a Gruntarian who stood nearly 8 feet tall and possessed the personality of a malfunctioning waste disposal unit. "Stand down immediately," Vevex bellowed, his translator making his words sound tinny and harsh. "You are in violation of Station Protocols 17 through 29. Surrender, or we will use lethal force. Please do not shoot her," I muttered under my breath as I rounded the corner. The scene before me would have been comedic if it were not so absolutely terrifying. Lena stood in the center of the corridor, facing down Commander Thax and 6 security officers. She looked completely relaxed, her hands at her sides, that strange luminescence still visible in her eyes. The security team, by contrast, looked like they were about 3 seconds away from a collective panic attack. "Commander," Lena said in that harmonic, wrong but right voice, "your weapons will not harm me. Please lower them before someone gets hurt. You have destroyed station property and assaulted medical personnel." Thex replied, his weapon raised. "I am authorized to use any means necessary to neutralize the threat." "I am not the threat," Lena said, and something in her voice made my spinal column feel like it was trying to crawl out of my body. "I am a warning." That was when I noticed the other humans. There were 3 of them, standing in the cross corridor behind the security team. 2 engineers and a medical technician, if I recognized the uniforms correctly. Their names were, I believe, David Park, Aisha Okonkwo, and Thomas Riley. They were standing very still, their faces blank, and their eyes, oh no, their eyes had that same inner glow. "Commander Thex," I called out, stepping into view and immediately regretting it as 6 weapons swiveled toward me. "Wait, do not fire. I need to examine her." Thex's massive head turned toward me, his 4 eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here? This is a security situation." "This is a medical situation," I corrected, walking forward with far more confidence than I felt. "Dr. Kovacs suffered cardiac arrest approximately 8 minutes ago. She was clinically dead for 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Whatever is happening to her as a result of that incident." She ripped a door off its hinges, one of the security officers said, his voice climbing toward hysteria. "That's not a medical condition. That's a horror movie." Lena's head tilted toward me and I saw recognition flicker across her features. "Born 12, still taking notes, always," I replied, holding up my datapad. "For instance, I have noted that you appear to have infected 3 other humans with whatever you are. Would you care to explain how that works? Is it airborne, fluid transmission, quantum entanglement? I am quite curious." The security team stared at me like I had lost my mind. They were probably correct. "Infected is the wrong word," Lena said, taking a step closer. Thex raised his weapon higher, but she ignored him completely. "We are not a disease, researcher. We are an awakening. When I died and came back, the signal went out. Every human on this station with the right genetic markers felt it. Most will sleep through it. Their biology is not ready. But some," she gestured to the 3 humans behind the security team. "Some of us are compatible. The ancient code recognizes itself. We remember what we were supposed to be." "And what is that exactly?" I asked, my fingers moving across my datapad, recording every word. "Soldiers," she said simply. "Humanity was seeded 15 million years ago by the Precursors. Your histories call them the architects, the first ones, the makers. They fought a war against something that lived in the space between dimensions, something that wanted to consume all biological life. The Precursors created weapons, living weapons. They took primitive species and rewrote their genetic code, hiding programs deep in the DNA waiting to activate when the threat returned." "That is insane," Commander Thex said flatly. "It is accurate," countered David Park, speaking for the first time. His voice had that same harmonic quality. "The Corellian tissue sample was not dormant biological matter. It was a data storage system. Encoded in the protein structures was a activation sequence. When Dr. Kovacs applied the electrical stimulus at the correct frequency, it transmitted the unlocked code." Aisha Okonkwo nodded, her movements eerily synchronized with David's. "We have been asleep for so long. Humanity evolved, built civilizations, reached for the stars, all while carrying this buried potential. And now we are awake." Thomas Riley smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "And we are very, very hungry." That was the moment Commander Thex decided talking time was over. "All units, fire." What happened next occurred so fast that my eyes could barely track it. Lena moved, not running, not dodging. She simply was not there anymore. The plasma bolts struck empty air where she had been standing a microsecond before. Then she was behind the security team, her hand on the back of Thex's massive skull. "Sleep," she said gently. The Thex dropped like someone had cut his strings. The other security officers spun around, but the 3 awakened humans were already moving. David caught one officer's weapon and crushed the barrel in his grip. Aisha moved with a dancer's grace, disarming 2 more before they could fire. Thomas simply pointed at the remaining officers, and they collapsed, their bodies twitching. Did you just use telepathy? I blurted out, because apparently my survival instincts had completely given up and gone home. It is not possible with human neurology. It was not, Thomas agreed, looking at his hand with wonder. 5 minutes ago, I was a medical technician who got winded climbing stairs. Now I can feel the bioelectric fields of every living thing within 50 meters. I can reach out and turn them off like flipping a switch. This is extraordinary, I said, my datapad practically smoking from how fast I was typing. The implications for neuroscience alone are staggering. If you could teach non-awakened individuals to replicate even a fraction of these abilities. Vorthal 12, Lena interrupted, her voice softer now. More human. You need to listen very carefully. We are not the only ones waking up. That made me pause. Explain. The activation sequence was not just stored in Corellian tissue, she said. It was hidden in biological samples across this entire station. Every xenobiology lab, every medical facility. Thousands of samples from hundreds of worlds, and when the signal went out, it went to all of them. I felt my circulatory system do something complicated and unpleasant. You are saying? I am saying that this station is about to become a very dangerous place, she finished. The Precursors did not just weaponize humanity. They weaponized dozens of species, maybe hundreds, and not all of them are going to be friendly when they wake up. As if summoned by her words, the station's emergency klaxons began to wail. A synthetic voice echoed through the corridors, speaking in the flat, emotionless tone that always preceded very bad news. Attention all personnel. Multiple containment breaches detected in xenobiology sectors 4, 7, and 12. Lockdown protocols initiated. All personnel are advised to shelter in place and await further instructions. Sectors 4 and 7 are where we keep the aggressive specimens, I said weakly. The ones that tried to eat the researchers. Tried being the operative word, Lena said. They are probably succeeding now. The sound of something large and angry crashing through metal reached us from somewhere deeper in the station. It was followed by screaming. Lots of screaming. Right? I said, making what was probably the worst decision of my very long life. I am going to need to document this. For science. You are going to get yourself killed, Isha said. But she was smiling. Everyone likes Vernon, Lena replied. And for a moment, she was just Lena again. My colleague, my friend, the woman who made terrible jokes about quantum mechanics and always stole my lunch from the communal cold storage. That is why we are going to keep him alive. I appreciate that, I said, though I would also appreciate an explanation of what exactly is waking up in those sectors and whether it is likely to eat me. The wreck specimens from Sector 4 are definitely going to try to eat you, David said helpfully. They are carnivorous pack hunters with acid saliva and a really bad attitude. But now they are also probably telepathic and strong enough to tear through bulkheads. That is less helpful than you think, I told him. Another crash, closer this time. The station shuddered. Somewhere something roared with a sound that made my internal organs vibrate uncomfortably. We need to move, Thomas said, his eyes unfocusing in that way that meant he was sensing something with his new abilities. Something big is coming from Sector 7. Multiple somethings, and they are not happy. Can you blame them? Lena asked, helping Commander Thex to his feet. The Grontarian was conscious again, though he looked dazed and significantly less aggressive. They have been locked in cages for years. Now they are gods, or close enough. Gods can be killed, Thex rumbled, retrieving his weapon. And I have bigger guns in the armory. That is the spirit, I said encouragingly, even though I gave the big guns approximately 0 chance of working against whatever was coming. We moved through the corridors in a tight group, the 4 awakened humans taking point. I stayed in the middle with Commander Thex and the now conscious security officers, my datapad recording everything. We passed several other humans along the way, staff members who had that same glazed look and glowing eyes. Some joined our group, others wandered off in different directions, following some instinct I could not perceive. How many humans are on this station? I asked Lena. 372 as of this morning's roster, she replied. I can feel maybe 60 who have awakened so far. The rest are still dormant. Their genetics are not quite right or their bodies are not ready for the transformation. And the non-humans? Other species? She paused, her head tilting as if listening to something. Harder to say. The precursors were not picky about which species they modified. I am sensing activations in Colixian, Thrinian, and Baruvian personnel, maybe others. It is like trying to hear individual voices in a stadium full of screaming people. We rounded a corner and nearly collided with a pack of wrecks. I had worked with Verk specimens before. They were nasty creatures from a high-gravity death world, all teeth and claws and murder. The ones in containment had been juveniles, each about the size of a large dog. We kept them sedated and behind 3 layers of security barriers. These were not sedated, and they were definitely not behind barriers anymore. There were 5 of them, moving in perfect synchronization like a school of particularly angry fish. Their scales had taken on a metallic sheen, and their eyes glowed with the same inner light I had seen in Lena. When they saw us, they did not attack immediately. Instead, they stopped and regarded us with an intelligence that had not been there before. Weapons, the largest Virex said. It spoke. A species that had been considered non-sapient 10 minutes ago had just used language. "We are so dead," one of the security officers whispered. "Not necessarily," Lena said, stepping forward. "We are not your enemies. You are food," the Vex replied. Its voice was like rocks grinding together, harsh and difficult to parse. "We have always been food to you." "You were never food," I interjected, because apparently I had not learned my lesson about keeping quiet. "You were research subjects. There is a difference." All 5 Rex turned to stare at me. I regretted speaking immediately. "Research subjects," the largest one repeated. "You cut us, studied us, took samples. Is that better than being food?" "It is definitely different," I said weakly, "though I concede that from your perspective, the distinction might seem minimal." "Smart words from prey," another Rex said, circling around our group. "But we are not prey anymore. We are hunters. We always were, but now we remember what we hunt." "And what is that?" Lena asked carefully. The Vex's eyes gleamed. "The things that hide in the gaps between stars, the things that whisper in empty space, the things that your people do not have words for because you never evolved to perceive them." A chill ran through my entire body. "You are saying there is something out there right now?" "Always has been," the Vex replied. "Always will be. The precursors locked us into these limited forms, made us forget what we were because the knowledge alone could drive biological minds insane, but now the locks are opening, and we remember." The station shuddered again, more violently this time. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped suddenly, my breath misting in the air. "That is not a mechanical failure," Thomas said, his eyes wide. "That is something else. Something is touching the station from outside. Not physically, but it is here." "Show me," Lena demanded. Thomas closed his eyes, and suddenly I could see it too. Not with my physical eyes, but with some new sense that the awakened were broadcasting. A vast shape, if shape was even the right word, pressed against the station like a hand pressing against a window. It existed in dimensions I could not properly perceive, folding in and out of normal space. Where it touched reality, things went wrong. Entropy increased. Chaos bloomed. "That is impossible," I breathed. "It is very possible," the Vat corrected. "It is inevitable. The precursors beat them back 15 million years ago, pushed them into the spaces between, but they never truly left. They have been waiting, watching, and now that the weapons are waking up, they know. They are coming back." "How long do we have?" Commander Thex asked, his weapon raised uselessly toward the ceiling. "Minutes," Lena said grimly. "Maybe hours, not long. Whatever is out there, it was waiting for this, for us to activate. It wants to destroy us before we remember how to fight it." "Can we fight it?" I asked. "We can try," she replied. "But we need more awakened, more weapons. And we need to get off this station before it tears itself apart." "The evacuation pods are 3 sections away," Thick said. "But if we are abandoning the station, we need to warn the Council. They need to know what is happening." "They will not believe us," I pointed out. "How do you explain this? Ancient alien weapons waking up inside their personnel, transdimensional entities attacking from outside reality. They will think we have all lost our minds. Then we show them," Lena said. "We gather everyone we can, get them to safety, and demonstrate what humanity has become. What we have always been, sleeping under the surface." Another crash, and this time part of the corridor ceiling collapsed. Through the gap, I could see something moving in the maintenance tunnels above. Something large and multi-limbed that definitely had not been on the station manifest this morning. Whatever we do, we need to do it fast, David said. We ran. The corridors had become a maze of chaos and violence. Everywhere we looked, awakened beings fought, fled, or simply stood in confusion as their bodies and minds transformed. A Galaxian engineer hung suspended in midair, surrounded by a field of crackling energy that should not exist according to any known physics. A group of Threnians moved through the walls like ghosts, their molecular structures temporarily phased out of sync with normal matter. And the humans. So many humans, their eyes glowing, their bodies moving with newfound strength and grace. Some helped others evacuate, some stood guard against the things emerging from the laboratories, and some just stood still, tears running down their faces. Overwhelmed by the sudden awareness of what they had always been, we reached the evacuation sector to find it already crowded with refugees. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all desperate to escape. The pod bay doors were sealed, and someone had activated the emergency force fields, turning the area into a makeshift fortress. Lieutenant Kessa, an Ovarian like myself and third in command of station security, stood at the controls. She saw us approaching, and her face cycled through several colors indicating relief, confusion, and terror. Commander Thax, thank the Founders. We have been trying to reach you. The communications array is down and half the station is going insane. And what happened to your eyes? Why are they glowing? Why are everyone's eyes glowing? It is a long story, but said, and we do not have time. We need to evacuate everyone now. Agreed, but we have a problem. Kessa pointed to the main display, which showed the external sensors. Something is blocking the pod bay doors from outside. Something big. The image on the screen made my organs do uncomfortable things. Wrapped around the station's outer hull, looking like nothing so much as a cancerous growth made of angles that hurt to look at, was the entity. The thing from between dimensions. It pulsed with a rhythm that made me nauseous just viewing it through the screen. It does not want us to leave, Lena said quietly. It came here to destroy us, to end the weapons before we can threaten it again. Then we convince it that we are not worth the effort, I suggested. Surely even trans-dimensional horrors respond to basic threat assessment. Or, said a new voice, we remind it why the Precursors made us in the first place. I turned to see Captain Elena Vasquez, the station's human commander, walking toward us. She was flanked by at least 30 other awakened humans, and her eyes blazed with power that made the air shimmer. Captain, said, you are awake. I am, she confirmed. And I remember everything. The war, the weapons, the price the Precursors paid to push these things back into the dark. And I remember how to hurt them. She looked at Lena, and some wordless communication passed between them. Then they both turned to address the assembled refugees. Listen to me, Captain Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the crowded bay. In approximately 90 seconds, we are going to open those doors and launch every pod we have. Most of you are going to survive. Some of you are not. That is the reality of our situation. But what you need to understand is this. Humanity is not the fragile species you thought we were. Neither are the Varex, the Galaxians, the Threnians, or any of the others who are awakening. We are weapons. Ancient, terrible, necessary weapons. And right now we need to be what we were made to be. She raised her hand, and the air around her fist began to distort, reality bending like plastic under heat. So when those doors open, and that thing outside tries to stop us, I need everyone to run. Do not look back. Do not try to help. Just run and get to safety. Because we are going to war, and you really do not want to be nearby when weapons remember how to fire. That was a terrible inspirational speech, I told her. She grinned, and it was fierce and wild and absolutely human. Humans are terrible at inspiring speeches right before certain death. We prefer gallows humor. You should know that by now, Vern. Fair point, I conceded. 60 seconds, Lieutenant Kessa announced. The awakened humans formed a line between the refugees and the doors. The awakened Vorax joined them, along with the Galaxians, Thrinians, and others I did not recognize. Different species, different biologies, all united by the ancient code buried in their genes. 30 seconds. I gripped my datapad tightly. If I was going to die, at least my notes would survive in the datapad's quantum backup. Future researchers would know what happened here. 10 seconds. Lena looked back at me and mouthed 2 words. trust us." The doors opened. The entity poured in like liquid madness, its form shifting between states of matter that should not exist. It brought cold and silence and the overwhelming sense that reality itself was coming unraveled. This close, I could see what it truly was, not a creature but a hole in existence, a tear in the fabric of space-time where things that should not be leaked through, and the weapons fired. Lena struck first, her fist connecting with a portion of the entity that existed simultaneously in 3 different planes. The impact created a shockwave that knocked half the refugees off their feet. Where she hit, the entity shrieked with a sound that existed below hearing, a vibration that made blood vessels rupture and bones ache. The other awakened joined in. Fire that burned cold, electricity that sang with harmonic frequencies, telepathic assaults that targeted the entity's quasi-consciousness. The verse tore at it with claws that could now cut through dimensional barriers. The Calexians wove patterns of energy that trapped portions of the entity and crushed them into quantum singularities. It was beautiful, and horrible, and absolutely impossible. And it was working. The entity retreated, pulling back through the open doors as the weapons remembered their purpose. Not to kill these things, that was impossible, but to hurt them. To make the cost of attacking so high that they retreated back into their dark spaces between realities. "Go," Captain Vasquez shouted. "Everyone into the pods. Now." The refugees ran. I ran with them, though my scientific instincts screamed at me to stay and observe. Lieutenant Kessa was herding people into evacuation pods with practiced efficiency, her voice calm despite the chaos. I made it to a pod, then hesitated. Lena was still out there, still fighting alongside the others. She was bleeding from her nose and ears, pushed beyond the limits of what her newly awakened body could handle. "Vernon, get in the pod," she shouted, not taking her eyes off the entity. "This is terrible scientific practice," I shouted back. "I should remain to observe. You should remain alive to write about it. Now move." Commander Thex's massive hand grabbed the back of my pressure suit and physically threw me into a pod. "She is right. We need witnesses. Be a witness." The pod sealed. Through the transparent canopy, I watched as the entity finally withdrew, retreating through the hull breach it had created. The awakened warriors stood their ground, ready for another assault. But none came. Then the station began to tear itself apart. Whatever the entity had done to the structure, it had compromised the station's integrity beyond repair. Explosions bloomed across the hull. Atmosphere vented into space in glittering plumes. The entire structure was collapsing in on itself like a dying star. "Launch all pods," someone ordered, and suddenly we were moving, our small craft ejecting from the dying station along with hundreds of others. I pressed my face to the canopy, watching. The awakened were still in there. Lena was still in there. "Come on," I whispered. "Remember you are weapons, but also remember you are alive." Then I saw them. Dozens of figures, human and otherwise, launching themselves from the station without pods or suits. They moved through the vacuum of space like they were swimming through water, their bodies surrounded by shimmering fields of energy that should not exist. They were flying. The weapons could fly. One of them was Lena. I recognized her even from this distance, even surrounded by that impossible glow. She caught up to my pod and pressed her hand against the canopy. Through the transparent material I could see her smiling. Her lips moved, forming words I could not hear but could easily read, still taking notes. I held up my datapad and nodded. She laughed silently and pushed off, joining the other awakened as they shepherded the evacuation pods away from the dying station. Behind us, Kepler 9 collapsed into a brilliant fireball. Its 30 years of research and cooperation turned to expanding gases and shrapnel. But everyone got out. Every single person on that station survived, because humanity, fragile, breakable, impossible humanity, had remembered what it was, what it had always been, sleeping in the spaces between cells, waiting in the quantum foam of biological matter. We were weapons, ancient and terrible and necessary, and we were awake. I looked down at my datapad, at the thousands of observations I had recorded. This would change everything. The Galactic Council would have to acknowledge what humans truly were, what dozens of other species were. We would need new protocols, new laws, new ways of existing together. It was going to be complicated. It was going to be messy. It was going to require so much paperwork, but for once I did not mind, because I had witnessed something impossible become real. And that, after all, is what science is truly about. My datapad beeped with an incoming message. It was from Lena, transmitted from wherever she was floating in the void. Vernon, stop smiling. You look creepy when you smile. Also, when we get to safety, I am buying you a drink. You have earned it. I smiled wider and sent back a reply. I do not drink alcohol, but I will accept a detailed written account of your experiences during reanimation. For my files. You are impossible. No, I am a scientist. There is a difference, though, as I floated in space surrounded by flying humans and the wreckage of everything I had known, I had to admit the distinction seemed less clear than it used to be. The galaxy would never be the same, and I could not wait to document every moment of it.